UFC Fight Night, we have Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. First card of 2021. We've been away for a little while, boxing MMA picks. This is our first video of 2021 as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in and welcome back. Welcome back. We're here to make you some money. We're here to give you some UFC breakdown, UFC analysis. And let's get right into it. UFC Fight Island 7, UFC Fight Night. This is an early card. This is in Abu Dhabi. So let's make sure we get these picks out there as early as possible, of course, for our listeners. We're going to start with the prelims as usual. We have quite a few fights on the prelims, some very interesting fights on the prelims as well. And let's get right into this first fight. First fight, we have Jacob Kilburn versus Austin Lingo. How do you feel about this fight? Because I like Lingo here.
Yes, we know Jacob Kilburn, his first fight in the UFC, he had to face Billy Q. Quarantillo, who utilized some grappling, and he couldn't really deal with it, right? So he's going to get a fight he wants. He's going to get someone that he doesn't have to worry about grappling with. But he's fighting someone in Austin Lingo, who I think is a limited fighter as he goes further up, as we've seen when he fought Yusuf Zalal in his debut fight. But this guy Lingo, he has hands. He socks you. He goes forward, moves forward. He can take a shot. Even when Yusuf had him in trouble, he survived, which is a success here. Whereas in this fight versus Kilburn, I see this fight standing. I see them both staying toe to toe. I just think Lingo's the better striker, and he has the power as well. And I think he's gonna be able to actually put him away, get a knockout.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because that was exactly the way that I looked at this fight. I think Lingo has the better stand-up. Even in that Zalal fight, he closed distance pretty effectively. And we know Zalal is somebody who moves around a lot. And he has a bit of that march down type of style to him as well. With Kilburn, I mean, the stand-up is just not quite as good. And to your point, this fight to me stays on the feet. I don't see Kilburn taking this to the ground. I don't see Lingo taking this to the ground either. I think this is going to stay on the feet. And I think Lingo is just a little bit better on the feet. I do see Lingo potentially piecing him up. And to your point, I mean, Lingo's nickname is Lights Out, right? So he has that knockout power. He's used to finishing guys quickly. And we're going to see if he's going to have that opportunity in this Jacob Kilburn fight. But knockout or not, I do like Austin Lingo for this one. But beware, I mean, this is a relatively low-level fight, to your point, as these guys move up the ranks.
You got to think when Lingo came into the UFC versus Yusuf Zalal, he was a pretty big favorite in that fight. So he came into the UFC with a history, with a future prospect type of label. And Yusuf obviously was the better guy, and he's shown that he's a really good fighter, Yusuf Zalal. So it's clear to me that UFC wants Austin Lingo to win here. They're giving him an opponent that should not be able to dictate the fight in certain ways that Lingo's gonna be in trouble. And Yusuf got Lingo down, and Lingo got back up. So yeah, I'm pretty confident here. I think the UFC set him up nice here for a win.
I agree. And if we take a quick look at Tapology, they actually agree with us as well, with about 87% in favor of Austin Lingo. So yeah, I think that's a pretty comfortable pick for the both of us. Let's move on to the next fight. Fight number 2, we have Sarah Moras versus Vanessa Melo. And I think we just went from a comfortable fight to an uncomfortable fight because we have two fighters with 500 records, pretty much. Sarah Moras versus Vanessa Melo. We know Sarah Moras is going to give you that awkward stand-up. We know she has that toughness. We know she walks through big hits. She never gives up. Definitely uses her size as well, clinching, dirty boxing, different situations like that against the cage, and potentially wins rounds in that way. With Vanessa Melo, I mean, she's 0-3 in the UFC. She's slow. She doesn't really have the best striking defense. Decent boxing stance, a little bit of a sneaky left hook. So, she's not, she does have some talent. But what I noticed from her is that she sort of plays the counterpuncher role minus the speed. And if you take her down, she does accept bottom position. She has a brown belt in BJJ. So she's going to be someone that pulls guard, accepts bottom position. And we know in the UFC, that's a formula for losing rounds. Ideally, I want to stay away from this fight completely. If we look at Vanessa Melo, if we do any sort of comparison, we saw Sarah Moras face Sijara Eubank in her last fight. I'm not comparing Melo to Sijara Eubank, but what I will say is that Melo shows a bit of that style in the stand-up, and in the stand-up, Eubank was able to beat Moras. I just don't see Vanessa Melo being able to possess the skills that Sijara Eubank had. Like I said, I mean, I want to stay away from this one completely, but if I were to trust one of these two fighters a bit more in terms of winning rounds, I'm going to go with Sarah Moras on this one. Could be a split decision, could be a unanimous decision, but this is not a fight that I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. This is something I tell people to kind of stay away from. I wouldn't really necessarily bet in this fight. They both lose a lot of fights. I'm not going to say much here. I'm going to go with Sarah. I think Sarah is the better fighter if I have to pick someone here. I'm not impressed with Melo, even though the people she lost to are all good fighters. Carol Rosa, Cortez, Aldana. But safe thing with Sarah, she lost some good fighters. Eubanks, Chasen, Bernardo. So they both lost to good fighters. But one thing that Sarah has is she has that win in the UFC, maybe a couple wins in the UFC. So she beat Ashley Evans Smith, Liana Jojua, but she's not good at all. In a fight of really low level fighters, I can't put the money on Sarah at favorite odds. The thing is, like, she is a low level fighter, even though Melo's a lower level fighter. I can't find myself putting money on Sarah at those type of odds. But if I have to pick, I'll take Sarah to win this fight. I think she has the better ground game, and I think she can actually outstrike her as well, be more active, and win a decision here.
I agree with that. Let's move on here. Let's not spend too much time on that. Pretty interesting fight for fight number 3. We have David Zawada versus Ramazan Emeev. And what I will say for this fight, there's a few situations that I can see happening here. I can see Emeev getting caught in the triangle the same way that David Zawada did against his fight with Nurmagomedov. I don't know if you remember that fight. He took him down, accepted the bottom position. Zawada kind of reached for that triangle, ended up catching him, got him to tap. I've seen Ramazan Emeev kind of expose himself to those similar types of situations as well. We know it's that Dagestani style of fighting. So I can see him getting caught in that way. Another situation I can see here, I can see Emeev landing takedowns pretty much at will. And, we can see that happening early, tire Zawada out by round 2, and pretty much cruise on points. Or I can see Zawada possibly landing a pretty big punch or a pretty big strike in the first round, hurting Emeev while stuffing the takedowns. So I will say this one probably a little bit closer than I want to admit for it to be. I do like Emeev on this one. I think Emeev has pretty good movement. I think he has good takedowns. I think he has good striking in the stand-up to set up that takedown. I like his chain wrestling. Again, we speak to that style of fighter that's really prominent in the UFC right now. He'll definitely attempt to finish that takedown. So he won't just sort of go for it, get stuffed the first time and it's over. He'll chain it together. He'll put it together. He'll try to finish it. And what I didn't like about Emeev from watching his previous fights is that he sometimes telegraphs those takedown attempts. He's willing to shoot from a pretty far distance. And that's when I spoke to Zawada potentially sprawling those and stuffing those, especially early in the fight. When we look at David Zawada, I mean, he's 1-2 in the UFC. As I mentioned, he caught Nurmagomedov in a triangle while he was losing that fight. I think his stance is a bit awkward. I mean, he's heavy on the feet, in my opinion. He kind of keeps a low stance, almost as if he wants to shoot for the takedown. That said, he does have some pop. He has some pop in his punches. He'll go for it if he senses his opponent is hurt. But again, I mean, if we're talking about path to victory here, Zawada to me has pretty questionable takedown defense. And outside of landing a submission attempt, I can see Ramazan Emeev winning this fight maybe 2-1, whether that third round is just a tired third round that really nobody wins. But I'm not going to say the most comfortable pick, but what I will say is that I do like Ramazan Emeev in this fight. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, this fight is going to pretty much be an easy fight for me. I'm pretty confident on Emeev here. I think Zawada gives up the takedowns too easy, and he likes to play that jiu-jitsu game. Ramazan hasn't been submitted since his second fight in 2009 against a submission guy, a fellow Dagestan fighter. So Ramazan, I believe he's going to be too tough, too strong. He's going to get him down there and just pound him out for 3 rounds. I think it's going to be a easy win for Emeev here. I don't think Zawada's striking is that much of an issue. I actually think Emeev is going to outstrike him as well. Get him against the cage, get him on the ground, and just win the rounds. Unanimous.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening as well. I'm not mad at that at all. Let's take a quick look at Tapology here. 86% in favor of Emeev. So, the fight pickers feel as confident as you do in that one. And again, I do feel pretty good about Emeev winning this fight. So, you know what? Let's kind of increase the confidence level based on your commentary there, and let's move on to the next fight. Heavyweight beware. We have Carlos Felipe versus Justin Tafa. Oh man, I don't like calling these fights at all. I mean, we have 2 fighters that are identical in a lot of ways. I mean, you immediately have to think about the common opponent here, which is Yorgan de Castro. Justin Tafa lost to him via flash knockout, whereas Felipe won via decision. And that's what it's going to come down to, in my opinion. I think it's going to come down to, does Felipe take Justin Tafa's hits? We saw him show a chin against de Castro, but I mean, again, this fight is not something that I would bet on. If you had a gun to my head and told me to pick someone, I would go with Carlos Felipe. And the reason why I would go with Carlos Felipe is I do think his stand-up is a bit more controlled. He has a bit of a better pace to his stand-up. Tafa's definitely the bigger striker, but I think Carlos Felipe is more likely to sort of carry his style for 3 rounds, whereas Tafa is sort of only dangerous in that first round, in my opinion. Like I said, the fight should stay on the feet. We have 2 very similar style of fighters here. You probably have a bigger puncher versus a more technical puncher. Tafa being the bigger one, Felipe being the slightly more technical one. And I'm going to go with the slightly more technical puncher here.
Okay. Yeah, this fight's going to come down to if Justin can catch Felipe in the first couple minutes. I think that's going to dictate the fight. I think Felipe can take a shot. He hasn't been knocked out. He's only fought 10 times. Another big thing is he's fought 10 times. Justin only fought 5 times. Felipe versus the Castro. Felipe showed me that he can actually fight into the 3rd round. He doesn't really, even though he's not in the best of shape, this guy can fight at a pace for 3 rounds. And I don't think Justin Tafa can fight at that pace. If Justin can't finish him, I got to go with Felipe. As an overall MMA fighter, he has more experience. And I think Felipe, looking at not his UFC fight versus Struve, where he got schooled on the ground, but looking at his fights before that, he has an underrated ground game, where if he does get Justin on the ground, I think Justin is going to be in trouble. So, yeah, I think Felipe is my pick. But again, yeah, this is a tough fight because Justin definitely, in my opinion, has some technical he has pretty good stand-up. He can land, and he has power. So yeah, it's a tough one. But if Felipe, who I think has the chin, can survive that first couple minutes, I think it's his fight.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Let's move on to the next fight here. We have Wu Yanan versus Joselyne Edwards. How do you feel about this fight?
Okay, so this Yanan girl, Wu Yanan, I'm not impressed with her at all. Actually, she's one of those fighters that I don't think is at the UFC level. She's fought. Let me see. Look at who has she fought in the UFC here. So she's fought Mizuki Inui, a fighter who I thought was physically much smaller than this girl, and Inui just outstruck her. So I'm not sure what Yanan is good at, if she's a ground girl or a striker. She seems pretty average in every area. She beat Lauren Mueller, a fight that she was getting beaten in. She was losing. And then, yeah, she got the armbar. She got beat by Gina Mazzani. Now, this loss.
She got smothered by Gina Mazzani.
Gina Mazzani is not that good, right? So she made Gina Mazzani look like a title challenger. Like, she made Gina look so good. So that just tells me her level. Her striking to me is pretty slow. She's pretty tall. She has good height for the division. But Joselyne Edwards, I don't know where her level's at. She's 9-2. She hasn't really fought any good fighters at this point. But the fighters she has faced, to me, like she pretty much beat, like she ran through them. Now the Sarah Alpar fight, that's a really questionable loss. It could have went either way. I thought Joselyne won that fight, but I think Joselyne is going to be a bit too athletic here. I think she, even though her striking is kind of greenish, I think her athleticism can get her to win this fight against Yanan Wu, or Wu Yanan. And yeah, I'm going to go with Edwards. I think Edwards is the pick here. I think has the higher ceiling. From what I see, again, I can't really gauge how good Edwards is versus the fighters she's faced, but the people that she's faced, like, she has multiple first round knockouts, submissions in the first round. So she's running through these girls that she should beat, which is a good sign. So I'm going to take her, Edwards, to win this fight against Yanan Wu.
The interesting thing I'll say about this fight, from watching Yanan Wu, I will say, I mean, she's pretty young. I think she's 24, maybe 25 years old. I have seen her improve fight over fight. I mean, from getting smothered by Gina Manzani, I mean, you can't do that. Not at this level. But I have seen her look a little bit better. I mean, I do see some combination striking from her. She's pretty quick, pretty tall, pretty lengthy. That sort of Chinese striking style that we've seen from some other fighters in the UFC. Not afraid to clinch against the cage, not afraid to sort of have that dirty boxing clinch Muay Thai type of matchup in moments against the cage. And I mean, we see her on her back. She'll definitely shoot for that triangle, shoot for that arm bar. So just be aware of that if Edwards was to take her on the ground. What's interesting is that in that fight, or what's interesting, I should say, is that this fight is happening at 135. And I say that because Manzani looked way stronger than her at 135. I feel like Wu Yanan should compete at 125, in my opinion. But that said, I mean, Joselyne Edwards herself is a pretty lengthy striker, pretty long fighter. These are two pretty long fighters. It's hard to say. I agree with you in terms of Joselyne Edwards having maybe the higher ceiling, but it's going to be tough. And I think it's really tough when you have a fighter who's really green in terms of her level of competition versus a fighter who has been in the UFC a couple of times. I'm going to actually go with Wu Yanan on this one. And what I'm going to bank on, and I may be wrong here, I'm going to bank on her improving fight over fight. I'm going to bank on her combination striking. And I think if Joselyne Edwards is not able to get her out of there early in the fight, I feel like Wu Yanan can possibly break her with her kind of new experience in the UFC. Not a confident fight for me at all. I can understand why you would go with Joselyne Edwards, and I do in some ways agree with that. But my gut is telling me go with Wu Yanan. She's going to be more improved. She's going to sort of, point fight and sort of do a little bit better going into the later rounds. And I'm just going to roll with my gut on this one and go with Wu Yanan. But tough fight. It can go either way. Hard to tell. Hard to even study these fighters in a lot of ways. So you definitely want to beware with either fighter that you go with. Let's move on then to our final fight of the prelims. This is going to be a real good one. We have Philip Hawes versus Nassourdine Imavov. How do you feel about this one? Because I actually feel really confident with Philip Hawes on this.
Yeah, I'm not too confident on either side here. Philip Hawes, he's we know about him. He's a wrestler. Strong guy, like really, really strong for the weight class. He had a really good fight, his last fight. I'm not really sold on Hawes though, because I remember Hawes. I know he improved a lot, but I remember Hawes from The Ultimate Fighter. I remember that fight versus Andrew Sanchez, and everyone was talking about how this guy trains with John Jones. He's John Jones' training partner. Greg Jackson gym. He's going to walk through this Andrew Sanchez guy. And this guy's going to win the Ultimate Fighter show. There's so much hype behind the guy if you watch that episode. This guy got destroyed. He couldn't get the takedown on Sanchez, and he just got beat up. He just got beat up for the 2 rounds, right? And he didn't even make it on the show, if I remember correctly, or he got eliminated off the show. Either way, he was supposed to win the whole thing. And then I saw something else from this guy when he fought Julian Marquez on the Dana White Contender Series. Another situation where he's looking okay in the first round, and then he gasses. And then when he gasses, he can't get the takedowns, and then he got destroyed. So my problem with this guy is, after that, he beat Michael Wilcox, Dominic Schrober. Like, these are nobodies, right? So he did beat Bestayev on the Contender Series, which is a good win, but still, he's not beating anyone. I think when he steps up in competition against a good fighter, I think he crumbles. I think after the first round, his cardio is so bad, and then he can't get his takedowns, and then his striking gets really sloppy. When you look at Imavov, this guy's he's a Dagestan fighter. He's fighting out of, he's from Dagestan, but he's fighting out of France, I think. But yes, this guy, he's taller, 6'3", so he's not as strong, though. He's not as physically strong as Hawes. So I can definitely see Hawes utilizing his wrestling, finishing him in the first round with his he has powerful striking as well. But I think Imavov has the better striking. I think he's the better striker. I think if Imavov gets us out of the first round, Imavov is gonna walk away and win this fight. Because in my opinion, we're looking at a wrestler who's learning MMA versus an MMA fighter. Like, this Dagestan guy, he has the wrestling, but it's not at the level of Hawes. But I think it's enough to either wear him down or tire out Hawes when he does his takedown attempts. And I believe he has enough wrestling to do that. And then obviously, I think with the striking, the 6'3", he has that strong, he has that really good straight, good jab. Yeah, I like him here. I think he's going to pull off the upset. I'm going to go with Imavov to knock out Phil Hawes. I think he's going to finish him.
Wow, that's big. That's big. What I didn't like about Imavov was that he struggled against Jordan Williams. And Jordan Williams was able to hurt him twice in that fight. Now, mind you, one of them was accidental headbutt. I will admit that. But Jordan Williams is a fighter who fights at 185 but weighs 181. And Imavov was, not to say struggling with him, but I wanted Imavov to win that fight a lot easier than he did. What I do like about Imavov is his movement is pretty calm. He's pretty light on his feet. Good counter striker, I will say that. But what throws me off about him is that even as a counter puncher, you still want to have moments where you strike first because you want to draw your opponent in to then counter punch him. I don't really find him striking first. I don't really find him throwing combinations. I mean, he likes that counter cross, the counter 2, but he really only throws one punch at a time. What I'm worried about with Imavov is, and I'm asking myself this, I don't know for sure, does he have a suspect chin? Because again, in that Jordan Williams fight, we saw there was 2 situations where he got rocked a little bit. He responded well. He grabbed the body right away. I think he got a takedown right away in both situations. But that part really concerns me because when we look at Philip Hawes, very tough to assess a fighter like this because you bring up great points about his time, earlier in his career. We're going back to, 2017, 2016. You bring up a great point there. But when we look at Philip Hawes recently, I like what I see from him. I mean, outside of the power being scary, I like the way he cuts off the ring. I like the way he almost has that stalking type of style. And more importantly, with big punchers, oftentimes we see that they just look to line up that big punch. But when I look at Philip Hawes, what I see is somebody who throws some fakes, he throws some feints, he kind of sets up that punch. Like I mentioned, he cuts the ring off, has that sort of stalking type of style. And I ask myself, how much has his IQ improved? Because when you look back at his most recent fight in the Dana White Contender Series, like you mentioned, against Bestayev, it seemed like he had a game plan. He sort of chopped the leg to start in that fight. And as he chopped the leg with the calf kick, he used that to close the distance and then ended up getting the knockout. I think you bring up a great point. I think Hawes probably has a 1-round chance here. against Imavov. I think Imavov can carry his style for the entire fight, whereas Hawes probably cannot. But I will say I am going to go with Hawes here. And the reason why I'm going to go with Hawes here is because I'm going to assume that he did improve based on what I've seen in his last 2 fights. I'm also going to assume that Imavov's chin is not the best. And I'm also going to assume that with Imavov never really striking first, it's going to allow Hawes to cut the ring off, set up that big punch, throw a feint or two, throw a fake or two, and then land that big punch that eventually puts him to sleep. I'm not guaranteeing a knockout by any means, but I do think Philip Hawes can very much win this fight by knockout. It is a close fight. I agree with every single point you've mentioned with Imavov, but I am going to go with Philip Hawes on this one here.
Okay.
Yeah, but tough fight. I mean, tough fight, right? So let's before we sign off with the prelims, let's take a look at what's going on in Vegas. Which fights do we feel good about? Which fights maybe do we feel like has an underdog chance? What are we looking at? How are we feeling? I like Lingo. I do like Lingo. I think, to your point, this fight is set up for Lingo to win.
Let's see.
It's not easy.
So what are we looking at for flocks, salt and flocks, or
let's
looking at picks of like Ramazan Emeev and Austin Lingo. Yeah, they should get it done in the preliminaries. Underdogs, I'll have to go with I like Joselyne Edwards, man. She's gonna win that fight. Underdog pick. Is she an underdog still?
You know what's interesting? That fight has become a pick'em now.
See? People know what I'm seeing, man. People are seeing what I'm seeing. I like Joselyne Edwards there that's in my opinion, that's still an underdog. That opened up as an underdog.
I agree.
I think that changed today.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. I think we're pretty uniform in terms of kind of the confident picks. Emeev is a good one. Lingo is a good one. For me personally, I do like Hawes as well, but he can definitely get exposed. So let me not include that there. So yeah, let's say, our 2 confident picks, Ramazan Emeev, Austin Lingo. That's pretty much a double up on your money. I mean, $100 will get you $198 in return. So pretty much a double up on your money there. If I were to pick an underdog, oh boy, this is tough. I don't think I have an underdog. I'm not going to lie to you. I really don't have an underdog pick here. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to force an underdog pick for our listeners. But I am going to say again, those 2 more confident picks on the undercard, on the prelim card, those should get it done for you. Ramazan Emeev as well as Austin Lingo. Of course, as we know, as usual, main card coming up next. So definitely stay tuned for that. Philip Hawes versus Imavov as the final fight in that prelim. And let's make some money, man.
Let's do it.